Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you're a regular here and you haven't yet, and watch until the end to see who all are in the running for next episode. Should be fun. This is Challenger Approaching, where we take a character who isn't playable in Smash Bros. Yet and theorycraft a full fighter design as if they got in for real. Our challenger this time is something I somehow haven't done an episode for yet, a retro character from the NES era. Smash has a long history with retro picks, at least one getting into almost every game from Melee onward, only skipping Ultimate because its base roster had so few newcomers in general. But Smash 6, or whatever its name becomes, is a chance to return to form with a character who has only become more requested with time. How do we best capture and modernize the essence of his original game, despite having the oldest source material of any challenger yet? Get your sword and your throwing arm ready, because here we go! Takamaru! Takamaru is the protagonist of a Japanese Famicom title that was never originally released worldwide, with a legacy that has spread much further. His story begins in Japan's Edo period, where there stood a grand palace known as Murasame Castle, named for a statue located there that depicted a divine spirit of the same name, said to protect the people living nearby from harm. That is, until one dark and stormy night, when a mysterious life form descended upon the castle, seizing control of it, bringing the Murasame statue to life, and emanating a wicked aura that formed inhuman constructs out of the earth. Making matters worse, the entity bequeathed strange gemstones to the lords of 4 surrounding castles, which corrupted their minds into doing its bidding and spreading its armies and influence further. As word spread of the chaos gripping the countryside, the then ruler of Japan took action, deploying the apprentice samurai Takamaru to investigate the rumors and restore peace. Little did either of them realize the otherworldly threat they were up against. The mysterious Murasame Castle may be but a single game that didn't leave Japan until a surprise 3DS eShop release in 2014, but it left an impact nonetheless. As a sister title to the original Legend of Zelda, both were built on the same engine, Nintendo has kept giving it cameos and other references, ranging from a treasure in Pikmin 2, to a placeable effect in Super Mario Maker 2, to an entire attraction in Nintendo Land. Takamaru himself was even a major character in the offbeat experimental title Captain Rainbow, which itself never left Japan. And it's not just Nintendo who has a soft spot for the game. The Wii version of Koei Tecmo's Samurai Warriors 3 features an entire side campaign that adapts the story to Musou-style gameplay, with Takamaru himself as an unlockable character, which is where this footage is coming from. But the reason you've probably heard of this guy is because of his presence in Smash already. Got a sticker in Brawl, became an assist trophy in Smash 4, picked up a Mii costume through its DLC, and retained all of it in Ultimate, swapping the sticker for a spirit. According to Sakurai, he was even seriously considered as a newcomer for Smash 4, but fear that he wouldn't be recognized enough outside Japan got him rejected. The good news is, he's already made strides toward changing that. Between his supportive role in Smash, cameos elsewhere, and his game now being available worldwide, first through the 3DS eShop, now Nintendo Switch Online, more people are aware of Takamaru than ever, and actively supporting him. If Smash 6 has room for a retro newcomer again, this is definitely someone worth keeping an eye on. So, let's see how Takamaru could fight in Smash! This character's appearance matters a lot. Updating a character from the 1980s requires some extra TLC. Smash has done some of the legwork already with his assist trophy, but I wanted to iterate further. As you can see in the key art, his outfit has extra details now, inspired by his other 2 appearances in the last 15 years. I'm trying to represent the character as if his series got a revival recently and he got a Little Max style redesign. Did it work? These updates also apply to Takamaru's weapon, or weapons. He's already been wielding a classic katana, but now he's got a backup. Turns out, real-life samurai in the era his game takes place in often carried 2 swords to use in different situations. And now, Takamaru will supplement his katana strikes with a wakizashi, a type of Japanese short sword. Also, unlike his assist trophy appearance, he'll keep both swords sheathed by default, resting his right hand on his katana's hilt as he moves around so he can draw and swing either of his swords in one fluid motion. Not only do these Iai Jutsu animations better match his swordplay in his game, only using it if there's something close by, it also stands out visually and looks really freaking cool. How about alternate costumes? Despite the visual updates, Takamaru's default still uses the color scheme of his original artwork, which gives us a good starting point to branch out from, with 4 alts that adjust the colors of his hair and kimono based on the 4 castle lords he has to defeat in his original game. Then his 6th palette is a striking combo of white, black, and reddish pink, combining elements of the corrupted Murasame castle and the Murasame statue itself. Next, a very obvious 7th alt directly based on the colors of his in-game sprites. And bringing up the rear is a colorful alt based on his color scheme in Captain Rainbow. Sure, it might go over the heads of overseas fans, but I think it's fair game. We might be updating a lot, but Takamaru's fighting style should still be an extension of his original game, even if it's an acquired taste. In MMC, he relies on throwing projectiles to attack from range, using his sword if he has to fight up close. In Smash, that means he'll have multiple types of projectiles to control combat from a distance, deal steady damage with each hit, and/or preemptively cover options his opponents might go for so they can't get up in his face uncontested. If they do, though, he can still fall back on swordplay, carefully. Attacks using his katana have good power and range, but they tend to make him more vulnerable afterward compared to other sword users. Attacks with his new wakizashi, however, are faster and less punishable, but they're shorter and don't hit as hard. Each has flaws to consider. Looking at stats and other details, yeah, Takamaru isn't very heavy. In his game, he gets knocked flat by simple attacks and can only take 3 hits before losing a life and all of his power-ups. Using his tools to avoid taking too many hits is important for him. Though he can scramble if necessary, thanks to being pretty fast on the ground. With above-average run speed and a top 25 fastest walk, Takamaru has some mobility stats going for him. Must have picked up some red sandals on the way here. Or maybe not, because the rest of his movement stats and recovery are pretty mid. Mediocre airspeed, a slower than average initial dash, and middling fall speed all keep his speed in check. Thought it best not to make the zoner character too fast. On offense, Takamaru is also a mixed bag. His katana strikes and projectiles deal good damage, and he has multiple ways to net knockouts. However, his combo options are kinda lacking, and most of his moves aren't very fast. Just like in his game, Takamaru doesn't overwhelm his foes, he wears them down using skillful attacks and maneuvers until they're vulnerable to a finishing blow. Now for a closer look at this samurai's arsenal. Takamaru's basic attacks include a very unusual jab, because, like in his game, it's actually 2 different moves based on if an enemy is nearby. If you are next to someone, Takamaru draws his wakizashi and performs 3 quick slashes diagonally down, then diagonally up, then straight down. But if there isn't a nearby target, he instead tosses a throwing knife straight forward, a single hit projectile that travels a little over a dash length and medium speed. The rest of this set is more conventional. Forward tilt uses Takamaru's katana, performing a forward slash with a rising arc. Good for creating space and KOing eventually, but it has more end lag than usual for a sword fighter tilt. Up tilt is another katana strike, this one a big overhead swing from back to front. Hey, Link has one of these. Great for hitting people jumping nearby and quite strong, but again, you're pretty vulnerable if it doesn't hit. But not all of these are slow. Takamaru's down tilt uses the wakizashi again, with a quick horizontal swing at ground level. Faster but stubbier than his other tilts, it knocks foes backward at a low angle that forces them to attack off the ground. Rounding out the set is a dash attack where Takamaru stabs so forcefully with his katana that it propels him forward. Lasting longer than his tilts, it's great for hitting enemies trying to land. It's also very laggy at the end. But Takamaru is no mere swordsman. He also has some ninjutsu training, based on skills he's shown before, like using ninja scrolls to augment his abilities. For example, his forward smash uses a scroll to wreathe his katana in fire, and he slashes straight forward with such force that it simultaneously creates a stationary burst of flame. The elaborate startup makes it slow to come out, but it's strong if it hits. For his up smash, Takamaru infuses his katana with fire again, this time swinging it in a horizontal circle overhead. This creates a spiral of fire that pulls foes in for 2 hits, then sends them upward with a 3rd. More focused than his up tilt, more active, and even stronger. It's kind of like Pyra's up smash, but fancier. But who needs a sword to do everything? For his down smash, Takamaru pulls out a scroll and presses it directly onto the ground at his feet, causing fire to erupt from it and strike both sides simultaneously. Most resembles Mega Man's down smash, but the flames spread outward instead of upward and don't last as long. Takamaru's air game keeps up the variety. His neutral air is another wakizashi attack, a relatively quick horizontal spin slash. It's sort of like specifically the second part of Mars Snare, with shorter range but more combo-friendly knockback. Forward air is the typical downward slash a lot of sword fighters have. Takamaru's has some extra range compared to the usual, but also extra lag, like usual for his katana moves, so plan accordingly. Anticipating an attack from behind, Takamaru's back air has him unsheath his katana and swing behind him halfway while barely turning around at all. In practice, it's a character-specific take on the usual swordy back air, with a narrower hitbox than its forward counterpart, but more power. But remember, Takamaru has more than just swords. His up air has him wave another scroll over his head, creating a wave of flame that fans upward. The fire has a main hit at the start and a weaker late hit that lingers for a few frames afterward. Lastly, look out below. Takamaru's down air has him point his katana downward and plummet to the ground. It's already strong during the descent, but when he reaches the ground or a platform, the impact has an extra large landing hitbox. He's also a sitting duck afterward if it doesn't hit, so don't overuse it. For his grab animations, Takamaru doesn't do anything too crazy. Reaching forward with his left hand like most swordies do, he keeps his right hand free to draw either of his swords as needed. His pummel is the typical knee strike as well. Grappling isn't his strong suit, it's just an option he has. At least his throws are more interesting. Takamaru's forward throw borrows a move from a couple of samurai-adjacent classes in the Fire Emblem Warriors games. This kick and slash combo deals 2 hits for solid damage. Takamaru's back throw has him swiftly spin behind his opponent, slashing backward with his katana in the process. Not only does it look cool, it's strong enough to be a viable kill throw near the ledge. Up throw uses the wakizashi, with Takamaru striking the opponent with a quick upward slash that sticks close to his body. Yes, I know I used this reference for Shez's moveset already. Work with me here. But instead of drawing a sword for his down throw, Takamaru pulls out another scroll, causing the ground beneath his foe to burst into flame for multiple hits. He can even combo off it at lower percents. Let's wrap this part up with Takamaru's taunts. His up taunt is a samurai staple / cliche, dramatically unsheathing his katana, complete with sound effect, and holding it overhead in the classic pose, beckoning enemies into combat. Side taunt shows off his ninja training instead, pivoting in place with a pair of quick wakizashi flourishes before posing with a scroll in hand. And for his down taunt, Takamaru calmly sits down Seiza style, briefly closes his eyes, and exhales quietly. Good for recollecting yourself after making a bad mistake, or reacting to other players who just made fools of themselves. Now, let's see what Takamaru has up his sleeves to back up the swordplay. Opening with a neutral special that you might recognize. Also known as that thing his assist trophy spams, the windmill sword is an alternate throwing weapon from his game that travels extra far. As a playable fighter, press B and Takamaru takes out one of the twin-bladed sickle projectiles and prepares to throw it. Tap again and he lets it fly straight forward. Quickly crossing an entire average stage length and then some, the blade deals minor damage on hit with mild knockback that sends foes diagonally backward. Oh, did I mention this move has multiple stages you can let it charge to, like a few other fighters' neutral specials? Each one is inspired by one of the shogi piece power-ups that augment Takamaru's projectiles in his game. A level 2 charge throws 2 sickles in a V formation, without the one that goes straight forward, inspired by the bishop piece and its diagonal movement. Level 3 takes after the king piece, throwing 3 projectiles stacked atop each other for wider coverage. And when fully charged, Takamaru draws on the rook power-up and throws 4 at once in a cross pattern. This stage also powers the projectiles up to deal extra damage and pierce through enemies in their way. Windmill Sword is a long-distance zoning tool for disrupting opponents that covers a wide range of angles, adjustable based on what your foes try to do. Like similar neutral specials, you can store the charge for later, with the charge saving at each level reached. But this move has one big downside. Even its higher charges aren't a threat to KO anyone ever, not outside of specific edgeguards, that is. That's one projectile special, but what self-respecting zoner doesn't have another? Cue Takamaru's other projectile. showing up in its full glory. We've had moves inspired by the fireballs he can obtain already, but this one works closest to the original, kind of. On use, Takamaru unsheathes his katana while wrapping a scroll around the blade, infusing it with fire. Then he performs a downward slash that casts a pair of spinning fireballs from his sword, lined up vertically, not horizontally like in the footage here, that travel forward while rotating around each other. The flames slowly spread out and slow down the further they fly, and each fireball has its own hitbox, letting both strike an enemy shield at different intervals to throw off parry attempts, or letting one clash with an enemy projectile while the other keeps going. And by holding B at the start, Takamaru gathers more power into his katana before letting the fire go. The longer you hold, the further the flames fly, and the wider their eventual range before they dissipate. Fireball art creates a pair of projectiles that command space directly ahead and interfere with enemies' attempts to run straight at you. Can also cover platforms, pressure ledges when positioned right, and more. That said, you can't store the charge of this one, nor can you cancel out early. Once you go for this move, you're locked in until it's done. And while it hits harder, it'll still rarely kill outright, except on opponents off stage at high percents. Took me some time to figure out a good up special for this one, but I eventually settled on something inspired by a secondary source. Loosely based on Takamaru's second combo in Samurai Warriors 3, this move taps into the hawk motif he's picked up over the years. Activate it, and Takamaru whips out his katana and performs a rising uppercut slash that propels him upward. Reaches about as high as Marth and Lucina's up specials, but straight up by default and with less flexible angling left or right. Press B a second time though, and Takamaru stops in place. In one smooth motion, he quickly sheathes his katana, draws his wakizashi, and slashes with it 3 times straight ahead for a self-contained combo that deals extra damage. And you can do this at any point during your ascent once it gets going, suddenly pivoting from emergency lift to a burst of offense in the blink of an eye. Hawk Strike is a rising recovery move with optional vertical pressure, aiding your offense and survivability both. Being free to kickstart the second part at nearly any time means you can use it to pressure platforms without having to be at a specific range beforehand. But for actually recovering, it's just okay. The movement is pretty rigid, and you go into freefall afterward whether you do the second part or not. We're still missing a couple techniques, right? Let's fix that with something I've been saving for where it works best. A consumable item in MMC, this special scroll makes Takamaru impervious to damage for a few seconds while still able to use his sword. How do we make something like that balanced? Well, press down and B, and Takamaru takes a defensive stance and holds the scroll forward. If he's struck by an attack, it activates like a counter, negating the blow while applying a defensive shroud that renders him transparent, makes him faster, and makes enemy attacks pass right through him. How long this state lasts depends on the move that activated it. Proc it on something really strong, and you can get it for 10 seconds or longer. But how do you turn the tables on the poor soul who activated it? By using any A button move or your up special, Takamaru immediately exits the intangible state, channeling its energy into his chosen sword or scroll for a buffed attack that deals extra damage and completely ignores enemy shields. Vanishing Art is a counter with a delayed payoff that lets you choose your response strategically and scare the hell out of your foes in the process. You have one shot to make your counterattack count though, so choose wisely. You can activate it on projectiles, but it lasts for less than half as long compared to melee attacks. And while you can go for other specials or grabs while shrouded, they don't get the extra buffs. It also doesn't activate at all if someone grabs you out of the counter stance. But there's still something we haven't used. Quick warning, there are about to be some flashing lights on screen in about 10 seconds because Takamaru's final smash is his strongest technique. Another item from his game, the mighty Inazuma Lightning, calls upon the powers of the divine for basically a screen nuke that also reveals any hidden items. Yeah, there's a lot of room to upgrade it visually. Powered up by the Smash Ball, Takamaru holds a golden scroll aloft, channeling even more energy than he'd normally be capable of as it crackles with electricity. Suddenly, a massive bolt of lightning strikes right in front of him, extending all the way down from the stage's ceiling to his current position and creating an electrical blast if it contacts the ground. But as soon as it comes down, another bolt of lightning drops behind Takamaru to strike anyone behind him. Then a third bolt in front of where the first one struck. Then a fourth behind where the second landed. Then Takamaru raises his katana skyward as a final bolt strikes it directly, setting off a massive circular explosion that electrocutes anyone in range. He may look like a simple samurai, but do not underestimate him. This is how Takamaru could fight in Smash, an honorable swordsman from a bygone era sent to investigate strange phenomena only to face a threat beyond his comprehension. Yet despite the odds, he takes up arms nonetheless, expertly wielding 2 swords and other weapons to fulfill his duty, sending his otherworldly foes back from whence they came. Takamaru's projectile-heavy playstyle strikes from a distance to keep opponents at bay, with flexibility to fight directly only when necessary. Said projectiles, along with his good-enough mobility, make him surprisingly difficult to pin down. This helps him excel at controlling the pace of the match and forcing foes to respond to him. However, being a lightweight with linear recovery and limited defensive options means he has to keep opponents out as much as possible. Most of his moves are laggier than they seem, making him vulnerable to opponents who can bait them out and punish, which is a problem, as his projectiles aren't able to net knockouts on their own. To do that, he has to make himself vulnerable by attacking directly. And that is how I brought this old-school anime swordsman into the modern era. Figuring out how best to update retro characters is harder than it looks, especially moveset-wise. Had to decide how to expand his limited abilities in a way that felt unique, yet still in character. Working a few fire techniques into his normals was one step, and once I learned that samurai in his era often carried 2 swords, the rest started to click. Takamaru's come a long way, from hardly anyone outside Japan knowing who he was, to a point where a lot of Western fans are hoping his series gets a revival. And with Nintendo's next console not far away, maybe this is the perfect time. I think the mysterious Murasame Castle could work really well as a roguelike hack-and-slash type game, where traveling to and infiltrating each castle is a separate run with unique challenges to overcome, with tough-as-nails difficulty but the ability to use spoils from each run to acquire permanent upgrades over time. Am I onto something? Maybe. Anyway, special thanks to the following for helping contribute to this video. Extra shout out to Slink for providing extra info and helping me brainstorm ideas for a character he's such a big fan of. And props to my patrons for the continued support. And anyone who does support me, even just $1 a month, gets extra perks like voting on which of these 5 characters goes next episode. Who gets the invite, guys? So, until next time, I'm gonna be seeing enemy ninjas in my sleep.